Okay, so talking about the CRAP test and authority. In my opinion, I feel that authority is the most important part of the CRAP test. And typically, when I start evaluating things in my mind, I go to authority first, typically beyond some other things. And the reason for that is that authority can tell you so much about other aspects of the CRAP test, that who someone is and their credentials of why we should listen to them and why we should take this information from this person. Are they an expert? Why do they know what they're talking about? Tells you so much about accuracy, about whether or not they are truthful and honest and dependable, whether or not if they publish something that's untrue, they're going to make a correction to it or a retraction. Authority tells you quite a bit about bias. And so whether or not they, with the purpose of it, of why they're giving you this info and do they have an inherent bias, which we're going to talk more about that later this week. But authority kind of gives you directions on that. It also kind of gives you directions on relevancy, particularly in the intended audience, and is it popular versus scholarly. That authority isn't the deciding factor in that, but it's one part of it, that if you see an expert researcher could be writing peer-reviewed scholarly research, that's typically their bread and butter, but they could also be writing for trade or for popular. But also on the flip side of that, if you see a professional journalist who's reporting on climate change, they'd be writing more for newspapers and magazines. They wouldn't be writing peer-reviewed research. And so who the person is and where this information is coming from is really important to helping you decide other parts of the CRAP test. So really, authority at its base point is who is giving me this information, either the person or the organization, and why do I want to listen to them? What makes them an expert? What makes them reliable and appropriate to use for academic research? Because do keep in mind, this class is intro to academic research. So part of what I'm trying to teach you is what's appropriate to use for university level research. And so why do we want to go to specific sources? We're looking more for scholarly people and scholarly experts lots of times with your research. Okay, so this part of the video, I'm going to show you where you can find credentials for people when you're looking at published information. When you're looking at something that's formally published, either a book or a journal article, it's pretty easy to find credentials for people because they're upfront telling you who this person is. So looking at this article on benefits of social media, you're seeing the authors here, Victoria Betton and Victoria Tomlinson. One way to find out credentials for this is most of the time when you're looking at library resources, these names are hyperlinks. And so by clicking on them, you can search the rest of the database and it will look for other articles that have the same authors with it. So is this someone who's published multiple things and done a lot of research on this topic? That can kind of give you some of their background and expertise in the area. Another thing really to look for, though, when you're looking at scholarly credentials is where does this person work? And so looking at that within databases, that's much easier to find within the PDF of it. So this page was bringing me just the HTML full text. Click over to the PDF, and the PDF, like I've shown you before, brings you the scan of the article as it was published in the print journal. And so this one, typically underneath the title or somewhere near the author's name, you're going to get some sort of author description. So this one, Victoria Betton is Deputy Director of Strategy and Partnership at Leeds and York Partnership Foundation Trust. Tomlinson is Chief Executive of Northern Lights PR. So these are PR people who work in these fields, and so this is why they are having the credentials to talk about this. So most articles that you're finding in library resources have some sort of little note about who this person is. It's either right near the author's names. Occasionally I'll see it at the very end, kind of back after the bibliography and citation, so it's at the really end of the article. Other places you see it kind of different ways. Sometimes you have to click on it. So this one coming out of Sage Journals, you have this Erica Frankenberg. If you mouse over her name, you actually get this window popping up telling you she's a Penn State University professor. And so it can also connect you to articles by this person, searching Google Scholar. Other times, if you kind of scroll down, you have this submenu of article info. You get this little footnote next to her name saying she does work at Penn State. See that in quite a few other places. Coming out of Science Direct, you have these authors listed here. They all have these little footnotes of A, B, C, and A. And so if you click on that show more, it's bringing you these footnotes of the people with the footnote A work for this Center for Functional Biodiversity. B works for School of Environmental Science. And C works for this Department of Zoology. And so this article on eagles about how logging in the Amazon forest is threatening the world's largest eagle. So these are people who work in this field. So when we're talking about credentials, these are people who work and research and have professional degrees and professional experience working in zoology and environmental science and biodiversity. And so looking at animals and how biodiversity affects the environment and animal life and stuff like that. So they are experts within this. And so they have those degrees and that knowledge and that background and training. And so that's what you're really looking for. Is this is why we want to listen to these people. This is why we think they know what they're talking about. This isn't Joe Schmo on the internet talking about eagle biodiversity and how logging in the Amazon is hurting the eagles. This is someone who actually has degrees and professional experience working in this field, being able to talk to you about that. So that's really what you're looking at with authority, is kind of who is this person and what gives them the authority to talk about this. For books, it's a little bit harder for books because most of you are familiar with books that you get the author blurb on the back of the cover or within the front of the dust jacket. Library books, we don't keep the dust jackets. We do throw those little kind of papers that go around the hardback. That's what a dust jacket is. We toss those out because they're going to get damaged and when we lend out the books. So you don't really get that author description. If it's a paperback book, you'll still have the description on the back. But for books, best thing I would say if you're looking at books in Primo, if you scroll down here to where you get the details section, you get once again that these names are hyperlinks. And so you can click on them and see who is this person? Have they written other books or information on the topic that you're researching? So this one is talking about directing school and community theater with musicals. Another way, pop them into Google. So you have this Paul Argentini, stick their name into Google, possibly put it with the book you're looking at and see what comes up. Does something like Amazon or Google Books have a description of who this person is? That's a good way if you're unsure about the authority of a piece. Another thing to look for, remember, is what is the publishing house? So what is this Scarecrow Press? That's not a name I'm familiar with, but if we're looking at authority with this, Scarecrow Press is a subset of Rowman and Littlefield, not necessarily known for being scholarly, but not known for not. So that's when, remember, when we're looking at whether presses are scholarly and academic, if it is scholarly, it adds to it, but if it's not, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not credible or it's not appropriate or it's not scholarly. So keep that in mind. You do have to take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, parent organization, subset of this Rowman and Littlefield, coming out of Maryland, pretty well-known publishing house as well. So typing those in can sometimes, books, occasionally you have to do a little bit of your own research, but pop it into Google and see what is there, and it can help you understand who is this person, why do I want to look at them. Finally, that's good for published research where it's very formal. You have specific authors, and so they have credentials that people are wanting to tell you who they are and why you should listen to them. What about if you're looking at things you're finding on Google? Because you can find credible and accurate and appropriate information to use for academic research through Google. So this is a website I found when I searched for CTE, which, if you're not familiar, CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's where you're getting brain damage from repeated concussions. You see it quite a bit in athletes like football players and soccer players who are taking repeated hits to the head. And it's been a big kind of controversy within the football world in the past several years. And so I just did a quick search. This was on Google for CTE, and this is one of the first sites that comes up about frequently asked questions about CTE. And so this is one that, this sounds rather knowledgeable. What is this? And so it gives you this good background information, but why is it we would want to trust this site? So what is this BU Research Center for CTE? Credible people, credible websites want to tell you who they are. They don't hide this information. So when you're looking at websites, just when you look for bibliographic info, so you can create citations, when you're looking at authority and the CRAP test with websites and organization sites like this, look for that about section. So credible people tell you who they are. They don't try to hide it. Look for an about section, possibly scroll down to the bottom and maybe look for addresses, look for something that's mission statement. Who are we? What do we do? That kind of information that's trying to tell you what is this organization? Where do they get their info? Look for that. So this one, BU Research Center, is Boston University School of Medicine. It's officially a center dedicated specifically to CTE. So yeah, very credible. These are actual doctors researching this, and so that's where they're getting their information from this, and talks about it, works in collaboration with VA Boston Healthcare and Concussion Legacy Foundations, and so other credible foundations, and they're telling you who the director is and kind of their credentials of people who work for it and where this information is coming from. So I would say this is probably not the only source you want to use, because if you were being required to use peer-reviewed research, but I would say this definitely has credibility and appropriateness because it's coming from actual medical researchers. So look for those about sections on websites. If you're not seeing that, that's where I might start questioning. That should be a red flag. Credible people tell you who they are. So when you're questioning authority, the main point, like I said before, is who are they? Why do I want to trust them? What gives them the authority to talk to me about this? That they are experts, not Joe Schmo on the internet just spouting information. That what are their credentials to tell me about this? And that's what you're really looking for.